Hello Internet, my name is James, you're watching Macabre Manscape, the most ill-titled music-based channel on YouTube. And I'm doing a collection update today, and it's been a long time coming. A lot of the stuff I've been sitting on since about June-ish, I'm pretty sure, maybe some stuff from May. Mostly June. And this is going to be the most self-indulgent collection update I'm going to do in a while. So just heads up, if you've seen any videos on my channel, you know that my subgenres of choice are Gothic and Symphonic metal. That was my, home base, I guess you can say. And this is going to be pretty much everything here is just going to fit somewhere in those two subgenres. So if that's not really your cup of tea, you are excused. If you're willing to, check out some camp-ass shit, some, romantic and dark and melodic, that is your prerogative. Let's chat. Because in the next two collection updates I have planned, that's going to be like a puzzling combination of music that's going to make you probably scratch your head and go, who is this for? It's for me, but that's neither here nor there. Let's get started. First up, I have a classic in the genre, and this is Velvet Darkness They Fear by Theatre of Tragedy. For those of you who don't know, Theatre of Tragedy were a Norwegian band. They played early on in their career a combination, it was kind of like a gothic-leaning death doom metal style. Beauty and the Beast, they kind of pioneered that full-time. Again, there's a caveat to this label. They are often credited as the first band to do the Beauty and the Beast thing full-time. That means that they had, instead of guest session singers to do like a few lines of backing vocals on their albums, they hired a full-time singer in the form of Liv Christine to be that like soprano voice to counteract the harsh vocals. Now, that being said, super influential, super important. I do think that bands did this thing much better in the years that followed. In general, I think the bar for gothic doom metal has just exponentially like increased. It's just so much higher than it was back in the mid-90s. And as, important as this is, and I did enjoy listening to it, Theatre of Tragedy's really early stuff is just not my favorite material ever. I feel indebted to it, and I feel like listening to it and liking it out of obligation because of its like status as like a classic act, and it's truly not that good. I'm sorry, it's really not. The piano and the violin, inclusions sound great. The band is fine. But really, when you're doing, like, dour and melodic-based music, your melodies need to come through. And these vocal melodies that they wrote, I'm actually convinced they didn't write any vocal melodies for Liv Christine to sing. It sounds like they wrote the band parts and the lyrics, and, like, maybe the lyric writer had like a sort of idea of like how it was supposed to go, and then they plopped Liv Christine in a booth and had her like improvise a melody on the spot, and it's they got much better after this, honestly. Like maybe not their electronic stuff, but at least that had like vocal melodies that are memorable. This is just I don't even know. It's not great. But yeah, that's my take on Theatre of Tragedy. It's really not that good. But yeah, released 1996 on Massacre. This is the American 97 Century Media pressing. Has some red. I don't know if you can see that clearly. It has the double font, which is cool. It's a very pretty album. It has that mid-90s, tits out aesthetic. That was all the rage. You could probably trace it back all the way until about 2001 is maybe when it drops off. But yeah. Next up is an American band. I actually have a few American bands in here, which is a weird thing for this subgenre, because a lot of this stuff tends to come out of Europe and other places. But this is Avenitus Mortus. I meant to look up where they were from. I'm pretty sure they're from New Jersey. I could be wrong about that, so find out for yourself, kids. So this is an American Gothic symphonic metal band. They are super independent and DIY. Sometimes to, a slight fault. Like, I'm impressed that they've, put out their records. But there are some problem areas, let's call them that. So I have their second album, The Conspiracy of Love, that came out in 2012. And the third album, Transmutations, released in 2016. Conspiracy of Love I became aware of because I was listening to like my Pandora, internet radio. Pandora. I was using the app in college, like my second year in my government class, because I was just bored. So I just plopped in those headphones, and one of the songs, I'm pretty sure it was either Heart of Stone or Plain Hearts, the first two tracks. It was one of those that came on, and I immediately liked it. Unfortunately, I had not, hearted it on the app, and I tried to go back to look for it, and I couldn't find it. But I did recognize the album cover. So that's how I found it on the Metal Archives, is just, putting in American band, because I think I read the bio, said they were American band formed between, roughly this year and this year. And I, eventually they popped up and I found them, and they're selling this stuff on their website. So that's how I got them. I implore you to, support independent music. Go ahead. If you're into this stuff, check it out. I would say they have kind of a drum machine on these albums. And on this one, it's super distracting because it's not a great sounding drum machine. And it completely, whenever there's like a fill or like a drum roll that like picks up speed before going to like the chorus, it has that like, it's really, the sound quality isn't great. It's kind of distracting. It's just so obvious that it's like not real drums. But other than that, in general, I think the production is kind of fine. Maybe the vocals are a little bit too forward in the mix, but I think, they're good albums. Check them out, but they are, very DIY, as I've said. And maybe my one complaint is just the vocalist. Specifically, I think one of the band leaders, because it's a two-man project, and they have hired, it's mostly two guys, and they will hire like a different female singer for these albums. I will say that the one of the guy who does the vocals, I like his voice. I just think he needs to work on dynamics a little bit, because he sounds, especially on Transmutations, it's very high energy all the time, even though sometimes pulling back and being a little bit more tender and quiet would actually help the delivery like hit a lot harder. But yeah, that's just my like my few little complaints. In general, I think they are good records, and if you're a fan of the genre, check them out. They're not too expensive. I think I got these for $15 altogether, I want to say, but I could be wrong. I don't know, it's been a while. Okay, next up, from an indie group to a titan of the industry. This is Sirania. Now, my first collection update I ever did, which was also my first video. Was that my first? No. Wrong. It was my second collection update. I hauled my copy of the debut album at Sixes and Sevens. This stuff, I have their later career stuff, is very different. I think I'm just gonna get to it. So this is the 13th Floor. This is the first album that they did with their third singer, Eileen Jimenez, who's a Spanish singer, who is now currently part of Trail of Tears. I'm excited for their comeback. So this is their first album with her, and for those of you who don't know, Sirania was a project formed after Morten Valin was either fired or left Tristania. He was one of the founding members of Tristania, and in 2000 they parted ways. And this is his project that formed after. And the first two albums were very extreme gothic doom, maybe a little bit of black metal influence here and there, and then they've slowly incorporated more symphonic elements. Here at this point, their fourth album, The 13th Floor, this came out in 2009. This is Napalm Records, I think. Nuclear Blast Records. And at this point, they are like chasing that like Evanescence level, like commercial clout and fame and success. And I don't think it ever got that big. Well, first of all, I mean, you're not going to be able to outsell 17 million records. Sorry, Sirania. But that's just, fact. But they were looking for like similar levels of like radio play. And it kind of works to the band's detriment because a lot of these songs are not great. They feel very underdeveloped. And just some of them are just like commercial schlock. I do like the opening two numbers and the closing two numbers. So that's like The Path to Decay, Lost in Life, and then Winterborn 77 and Sirens of the Seven Seas. The Path to Decay is one of the earliest songs I'd ever heard of them, because when I got into this band was either late 2007 or early 2008. So I had the current like cycle was the Nine Destinies and a Downfall album that came out in 2007. However, by the time I circled back to this band eventually the next year, this was than the new record. So I saw the music video for A Path to Decay like pretty early on when it was uploaded to YouTube from Nuclear Blast. But yeah, it's not great. It's very pretty. It has that like cold, kind of dreary aesthetic that I think was all the rage back then. Now I think the trends for Gothic and Symphonic metal aesthetic is much more mystical and light and flashy and just very pretty. This was a very different time. 2009 was, a long time ago. Okay, so their fourth album, wasn't really my cup of tea. But then they got a new singer after Eileen was fired in 2015, and they have released 3 albums with that singer, but I only have the first 2 now, and that is Dim Days of Dolor, 2016, released on Napalm Records, and Arcane Astral Eons, released in 2018, again on Napalm Records. I have mixed feelings. Again, I think the trend for Sirania now has, since 2013's Perils of the Deep Blue, I think is what that's called, yeah, Perils of Deep Blue, is for them to go more heavy. So they had their, like, few albums where they were trying to chase that, like, commercial success, and I guess they decided that wasn't really working out for them. So they went a little harder, and the trend continues here. I have mixed feelings about specifically Dim Days of Dolor. I think it's fine, it's listenable, but it's not great. I do think that Emmanuel, that's not her name, Emmanuel Zoldan, I believe is her name. She sounds good. She's a good singer, but I think the songs here give her not much to work with. Dim Days of Dolor is kind of just okay. It's good, like you can listen to it, and you probably won't have very many objections, especially if you're a fan of the genre, but it's not something that I come back to often. Arcane Astral Eons, however, released in 2018, their 9th album, showed that this band actually had some like ideas left. Morten Veland is pretty much in charge of all the songwriting, and so you kind of find him, falling into these like pitfalls all the time where he's writing very like predictable or just repetitive material often, and he doesn't really change anything up. I think it's just like him putting all that responsibility on himself and not letting new blood like come in and kind of shape some of the songs is over time has worked as a detriment. But here we actually have some like cool music songwriting decisions. There's like some proggy elements and black metal like riffs that come in and go, and it's fascinating. Though I do think that it's largely all the best material is pretty upfront in the album. It's very top heavy. It's not at all a bad listen. I should actually probably spin this stuff more often. It's just that Sirania, because they tend to be kind of, repetitive, is not a band that I necessarily go after all the time. But I, have been enjoying them lately. I spun 9 Destinies and a Downfall the other night, and that was much better than I remember. Repetitive as shit, but much better than I remember. But the production issues, I still have my issues with the production. Next up is a band that used to be, in a lot of controversy, I guess, back in 2018, 2019. And I always saw them on Amazon, suggested to me, and I never looked into them. And that is Midnight Eternal. So this is an American power symphonic metal group. And look, I am going to be honest, I don't know what American power metal sounds like. Like, I have a pretty preconceived notion of what, Europeans power metal sounds like. But to me, this differentiation, this distinction doesn't matter. When I think of European power metal, I guess I think of, Camelot and early Nightwish and, Sonata Arctica. And then, I don't know, when I hear Halloween, I want it to shut the fuck up. But, I don't know. I don't really know, what the category of American power metal is supposed to sound like. I'm pretty sure they were going for a much, more European sound. From what I've gathered, they're trying to, market themselves to that, European Gothic symphonic metal fan base. So it makes sense. But it's fine. This album is fine. I can put it on and listen to it and jam it. There are, again, some problem areas. First of all, the most obvious thing is, the vocals are really weird. I don't remember, I think her name is Rainey Halal. But the singer has this very, nasally kind of voice. It's not, I think it's a choice. It's kind of like a combination of like Britney Spears nasality, but also like musical theater, like Broadway style delivery. It's very strange. And I think it's a choice because there are some songs towards the end where she completely drops that nasality to her voice and she sounds great. Like it just makes the song sound like that much better. I just think like it makes me question like why this choice. Eventually, the band decided that they were going to continue on without her, and that became an issue. And it eventually led to them changing their name, and they have since released another album with a new singer. But in general, after seeing what people have said and like both sides of the story, I think I'm Team Rainey. I'm sorry. I think I like her attitude, and I think she's not going to take shit from anybody. And you know what? All the power to her and her partner. I think her partner was the guitarist on this album. I hope that they have much success in their future. I might listen to Everdawn, the change name project. I just haven't sought it out at all. There's that. So yeah, fun power metal, symphonic power metal kind of thing. Next up is, speaking of power metal, this is Aethera by Visions of Atlantis. This was released in 2013 on Napalm. This is the Scarecrow Records version, I believe. Wait, is it? Yes, this is Scarecrow Records. So this is Mexican pressing. It's beautiful. That's really the only reason why I got this album, is because it is just absolutely beautiful. But I hate this album. My relationship with this band is really weird. I love some of their stuff, and the rest is like infuriating. But I am on a just mission to get all of it. I'm so close to. I think I'm only missing 2. Their most recent 2 albums. This is the last album that they did with both of their... who were their singers? It was Marco Plunk and... I'm forgetting the Greek woman's name. And if you saw my collection update, I think my last one, I said that they have very little vocal chemistry together. It is much worse here. They can't blend at all. It kind of just assaults you. A lot of these songs are not great. Even songwriting-wise, I don't understand what they were going for. It sounds rushed. Honestly, it's just not memorable, and like I've not been able to remember a single thing other than like the second track is really good, and then after that, I have nothing much to say about it. Like, its offensiveness to me has been forgotten. Like, it's forgettable that the things I found offensive about it, I just have no recollection of what they are. It's just super, I think, overly polished, really commercial symphonic power metal to a point where I can't vibe with it at all. There's no like musical storytelling. There's no commitment to like the theme anymore. Again, if your name is Visions of Atlantis, I expect you to like have a theme throughout all of your music. Somewhat nautical, mystical, kind of ancient sounding thing. And this, I don't even know what to say about it. I don't like it. It is very pretty though. If you want some, pretty albums, Visions of Atlantis is for you. Okay, next up, an American band. This is Fountain of Tears, their self-titled album from 1999. Allegedly, this band is Christian. I can neither confirm nor deny, even after like listening to these songs and reading the lyrics. On it, like I can kind of see it, but it's not really upfront. This is an American Gothic, progressive, very atmospheric metal project. I don't remember where they're from, but they released this in 1999. They had a follow-up in 2007, which I'm blanking on the name as well. And this is just 5 songs, and then those same five songs, instrumental versions at the end. It's fine. Like, it's enjoyable. I really appreciate the sounds that they're using, and like especially like the keyboard, kind of like that like spacey, proggy kind of like keyboard synth sound. Really interesting how they use it. And then there's this one song, I don't remember which one it is. I think it's The Sleeper, the 3rd song. It's like an actual like metal song, but the vocals are just poetry, just being like performed, like orated to you. And it is fun. I like it a lot. I should listen to it a bit more. Production-wise, because it is, I think, it was released by mental music, which I think was like a really not well known independent label. So it doesn't sound like it has like the best production on it, but it's fine. It's kind of hard to come by. This is basically, I would suggest, really like diehards for the Gothic symphonic metal genre. If you really want to like expand your collection and be like, I have that obscure ass piece of thing from the US in the 90s, this is for you. Other than that, I think most people can probably skip it and not miss much. You can listen to the whole album on YouTube. I recommend doing that. But yeah. Next up is a Polish band that I really like, or I have an appreciation for. That's Lorien. This is their debut album Lorien. I have a cassette version of this. However, I have been constantly on the lookout for a CD copy. And finally, two of them were listed on two Discogs in the same weekend, and I pounced on one of them. And this is, I would probably describe Gothic metal being split between two different schools of thought, and one being the theater of tragedy school of thought, where it's like, it's Gothic metal that has arisen out of death doom. And I would argue that most Gothic metal, especially in the 90s and in the early 2000s, was that before they went the Evanescence route. But at the same time, there was also the second school of thought, which was more goth rock, played with just a heavy metal backbone. And that is how I would describe this band. Very simple here. So you could honestly, I would not be surprised if they played like goth festivals back in the day, especially in the late 90s and early 2000s. This was released in 1998, by the way, if I didn't say that. And so they have a co-ed of like a vocal group duo. And I don't know, it's just very melodic. I would describe it similar to Lacuna Coil, like a very early Lacuna Coil, but without nearly as much keyboard influence. There are a few keys and strings, here and there, but they're really not a major fixture of this band's music, especially not in the debut. Maybe later on in the sophomore album, Chanik Fiatlo Tosu, I believe is how you pronounce that. But this is very simple. It's no frills. It's kind of basic, but it is enjoyable. So yeah, they're just one of those like Polish bands that probably got lost in the mix. Also, Poland, I've said this before, the Polish scene for Gothic metal was very insular, and a lot of those bands signed to Metal Mind Productions, and Metal Mind Productions did not do a great job at marketing their stuff to other markets outside of Poland. They just did not do a good job of it. Fortunately, this band never signed one of those deals, but that also meant that their stuff isn't as widespread or available as those bands, because they were constantly on very independent labels. I'm going to close my window now. Better, right? So they're on more independent labels. So this stuff is kind of hard to come by. It's kind of a rarity. So outside of that, I don't necessarily think that most people will have value in owning a copy of, Lorien's stuff, except for their new one, because their new one is just available out in the world. You have to look for it online, but they have it. Yeah, it's good. It's kind of simple, but it's good. I like it. Okay, next up. So I had this trend this year that I wanted to start collecting music by bands that I knew that I've liked, but for whatever reason, I have ended up with very little of their stuff in my collection. That include bands like Arch Enemy, or even Dark Tranquillity, or in the case of this collection update, I had Sirania stuff and Theater of Tragedy, but also Delane, which if you haven't been paying attention, Delane is a Dutch band that at the beginning of the year kind of broke apart into one person again. Founder and brother of Within Temptation, founder and guitarist Robert Westerholt. Let's see what his brother's name. Martin Westerholt. Westerholt. I should know these names. Martin Westerholt founded Delane in 2002. They debuted in 2006, and they've been pretty, big in the scene. And at the beginning of the year, they completely just, everyone left except for the founder, and he's starting to group and hire people again. But I realized I only have 2 of their albums, and so I had to start buying it. It was just one of those weird things. I'm like, why have I never bought any Delane stuff. So I had to make a concerted effort. So this is their second album, April Rain, released in 2009 on Roadrunner, I believe. This is the version released on Sensory on Digipack, so it has a bonus track, which is cool. And for whatever reason, this album is heralded as a symphonic metal classic of the 2000s, and I never really understood that. I think there are some great parts about it, like the second half is great, but the first half has this, there's a certain quality to this type of Delane material that I don't love, and it's kind of like it has this, maybe it lacks personality, it's very clean, and the production can sometimes feel like 2000s, like folksy, clean guitar pop production, and I don't love that. But I have to admit that some of the material on this album, I fully understand why people love this so much. It's just big and bombastic, and Charlotte Vessels has a much better voice than I think I've ever given her credit for. There's just certain things about her timbre that I don't necessarily love. Again, that like cleanness and that kind of somewhat, it lacks, at least in my eyes to my ears, it lacks a bit of personality. I don't think Charlotte is someone that I will ever gravitate towards, and she'll never be one of my favorites, but I have mad respect for her, and she has a solo career now, and I actually need to listen to some of that stuff, because I don't think I have at all. But yeah, so 2009 symphonic metal classic, I guess, depending on who you ask. I think it's good. And I think I think I still prefer the debut album over this, and then the fourth album, The Human Contradiction, that one was fucking great. Last two things I have, this is Turning Season with, Arcane Rainfall, not the same album. Arcane Rainfall by Draconian. Again, one of those bands that I've been a fan of forever, but for whatever reason, I am lacking a few key things of their discography in my collection. This is one of those. This is probably their most popular, maybe, in the fan base that I've seen. Their most popular album. I think it's fine. But I had to get it to complete my collection, which is still not complete yet. I'm still missing two. But this is 2005, released on Napalm Records. Super doomy, super dour, and like just dreary gothic doom metal. Beauty and the Beast style. This is one of those bands that, again, when I was talking about Theater of Tragedy, I was like, there are some bands where, like, since the 90s, there are bands that have raised the bar on gothic doom metal. Draconian is one of those bands, but this, to me, is not one of those albums. I think it's kind of boring. The songs are really long, and I usually have no problem with that, but they're also just not that engaging. So I don't love this album, but I do have an appreciation for just this band in general, and also some of the songs on this album, like Death Come Near Me is the obvious classic on this album. Very pretty, but I think it's just not as, it's not for me as I'd like it to be. Like, I love their third and fourth albums, and their debut is really strong, and this one is just kind of missing the mark for me. But yeah, very pretty. And last but not least, I have Mirror Moon by The Dream Side. This is a Dutch band, and they have an interesting history because they started as an ethereal wave band that is a subgenre of gothic music. They started off in the 90s as an ethereal wave goth rock band before ultimately kind of transitioning to this, which is their third album in 2001, which was, it's interesting. It has some like electro-pop industrial sounds at the base of it, with some like symphonics and orchestrations layered on top, and then also a hint of like gothic and nu metal, maybe an alternative rock in the background. It's an interesting album, but I think that when it comes to this style that they're playing, which they pretty much have been consistent with since this release in 2001, I think they would refine their style later in their sound, like 2005's Spin Moon Magic and 2009's what is it called? 2009's Lunar Nature and 2013's Sorrow Bearing Tree. I think those albums probably did a better job at presenting what they're doing here, and with a lot more conviction than this album. But not to say that there aren't songs on this that I really do like, you know, Mirror Moon, the title track, Above, Below, Around, and Fallen Angel and Forever and a Day are good songs. It's just in general, as a cohesive piece of work, I kind of get lost between all the details. But yeah, really nice, it's cool stuff. And that's my collection update. This went really long. I was hoping it would not be this long, because I think I'm going to have to splice this together using an editing software, and I didn't want to have to do that. But yeah, thanks for watching. Call to action, like, subscribe, like, comment, subscribe, follow me on Twitter if you so choose. This has been a collection update, and maybe I will get proactive and actually film an Ex Libris while I'm at it. Let's do that. Thanks for watching. Bye.